Hi, Bill. Thanks for joining me today on the interview here in my Facebook group and on the Relevant Recruiter Show. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, share with everybody where are you located at right now? Where are you living?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Minnesota, believe it or not, and uh, was stationed in the South when I was in the Navy. So fell in love with the South, and now I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I decided that there was no way I was moving back to Minnesota after being able to golf in December, and
Hmm.
so I'm a huge golfer, and the Olympics were coming here to Atlanta at the time. So when I got out of the Navy, I was on my way to Atlanta. I've been here ever since.
Nice, very nice. Are you family and everything out there in Atlanta now too?
Yep.
Or?
Yeah. So it's funny. Everyone seemed to migrate to wherever I went. So for a while, I had family in Charleston following me there, and now pretty much everyone lives here in Atlanta. So, but they're loving it as well. My dad actually was the last one to move down here, and he moved about a year and a half ago. So he spent 70 years in Minnesota before
Freezing.
before realizing. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know how he did it, but he's down here now.
That's awesome. And you have any kids, anything like that?
Yeah, so I've been married for almost 12 years. I've got an 8-year-old daughter, Maya, and a 1.5-year-old daughter, Layla. So uh, I nicknamed her Taz for Tasmanian Devil because she's just absolutely just terror right now. And it was actually it was I don't want to say humorous because it wasn't humorous for my wife, but the whole sort of stay at home thing with the school and home educating was not good for her trying to teach an 8-year-old with a 1.5-year-old running around. So
Yeah, that's funny. We've got a similar thing here. So we've got a 13-month-old, so a little bit behind, but we have four older ones. And so the homeschooling, same exact thing with my wife trying to go through and take care of the the 1-year-old with a homeschool on top. Yeah, it was, and we've got ourselves. I call her the little bull. She's the same thing. She just goes and she just yeah. So that's good stuff. So tell me a little bit. I mean, how did you get into, walk me through your professional career? I mean, I know you've got spent some time in the Navy. Appreciate your service and definitely interested in hearing a little bit about that.
yeah, absolutely. So I started my career off as a nuclear engineer in the Navy. So it's always kind of a funny story. I tell people, it usually requires maybe a beer or two to talk about, to figure out how we got from nuclear engineering to recruiting. But I guess we have an hour to do it right here today, so we can do a little bit of that. But yeah, I was on a fast attack submarine in the US Navy as a nuclear engineer for 5 years, and it was an amazing opportunity. It was, you know, being on a submarine. I kind of take it back to if you're in a fraternity or sorority in college. There's like a fraternity of people or friends that you really build. And being on a sub, we only had 100 people on the whole sub, so you knew everybody by their first name. It wasn't like you're on an aircraft carrier where there's 5,000 people and you're living in a small city. And so we were good friends. Obviously, we were huge teammates, and we relied on each other to operate effectively. And it was a tremendous experience. My job in the Navy was to operate and maintain the nuclear power plant that provided propulsion and electricity to the submarine. And I absolutely loved my work there, but what I hated was going to sea and not really being part of civilization for a very long time, and was
Yeah.
proud to do it and loved doing it. But at the same time, I knew after my first stint in the Navy, it wasn't going to be a career for me.
Right. Right. And how long did you serve?
Yeah, so I was in for 5 years, and then got out of the Navy. And as I mentioned, I moved here to Atlanta, not really knowing what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But I finished my degree, so I have a nuclear technology degree and a business management degree. And I started sort of leveraging some of my engineering background to work for a facilities management company here, and did that for 5 years. And back in 2000, when the job market was really hot, it was before obviously 9/11 and the dot-com bust. I landed a project management job working for a company called Spherion. And at the time, they were called Interim Services. And they're in the staffing, recruitment, outsourcing space. Had no idea even how to spell that at the time. And but it was a great job, and leveraged a lot of my experience to get that job. And that's really where I started cutting my teeth in recruiting and talent acquisition. And so started off as a project manager for implementing both RPO and MSP solutions for Spherion. And as I continued to grow my career, I became a lot more interested in designing recruiting solutions and getting a lot into recruitment technology. So I had a role where I was kind of the recruitment technology expert for Spherion's RPO division for a little while. And then as I progressed, I got more into operations and solution design, and then found myself, after I had operated for a while and got really familiar, got my hands on all of these solutions and figured out how they work really well. Ultimately, and really where my heart had always been, was I wanted to get into sales. And so really for the last about 14 years or so, I've been strictly focused on sales, and worked for a couple of smaller staffing firms in helping build their RPO practices and selling those solutions for those firms. And then for the last 11 years, spent my time at TapFin, which is one of the world's largest MSP solution providers, and was an individual sales contributor for them for about 5 or 6 years. And then I was promoted to run North American sales for TapFin. So that's what I did. And then, that's what ultimately led me to entrepreneurship, and left my perfectly good paying job, I should say, back in late October. And we started NetOne. So, yep.
That's good, man. That was the good Cliff Notes version of how do we get from submarine to owning your own business. So tell us a little bit about NetOne. I know talking to you the other day, it's very, very exciting, very cool thing you guys have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donnie, as you know, there's a huge movement to in the gig economy, right? There's a lot of gig platforms that have come out, and obviously Uber from a drive, and Lyft from a car standpoint. But the marketplace concepts are really making their headways in workforce solutions. And there's some well-known platforms out there, obviously Upwork being one of them, freelancer.com being another, and there's several others, Fiverr and ShiftGig, and kind of the list goes on. And so I've always thought in my head, if you think about talent acquisition leaders who are trying to increase their recruiting capacity on demand, and how do they do that? How do they do that quickly? And of course, there are a lot of variable talent acquisition solutions that exist out there today. But what I found was there was a void in a focus on the recruiting profession itself. And how do talent acquisition leaders connect directly with contract recruiters? And so that was the genesis and what created the idea for NetOne Recruiter. And so NetOne Recruiter is a digital marketplace that allows talent acquisition leaders to ramp very quickly and increase their recruiting capacity by engaging directly with contract recruiters. And for contract recruiters, it's always been, contract recruiting is a fun profession. A lot of individuals have decided, look, I don't want a job for life. I want a career for life. I love my independence. I want to work for multiple clients. I don't want to work for anyone else. I want to set up my own shop. I want to go from one gig to the next gig to the next gig. The challenge is you always have your sales hat on, because not only are you recruiting for a company, but you're also looking for that next gig constantly. And there's no real centralized place for those contract recruiters to find that next gig. And so that's really what NetOne Recruiter is for. So it brings all of the gigs to them. You've got your personal dashboard on the recruiter side to where you can find new gigs. You can collaborate with other recruiters on the platform. You can track all your project history. You can do some market analysis to see what you're worth, that type of thing. And then for clients, now they've got direct access to gig recruiters, and they no longer have to spend a majority of their time maintaining a network of contract recruiters, because it's all there at their fingertips. And so, so that's what it's about.
That's awesome. So it sounds like too, outside of the collaboration and connection, that you're providing a little bit of management on the backside too.
Yeah, a little bit. There are some planning tools that are available for the talent acquisition professionals, so that if they are, even if they know they're going to have a ramp in volume and they're trying to plan for it, what's my recruiting infrastructure going to look like? On September 1st, when I know I need to hire 100 additional people that month than what my normal capacity can hold, they can plan ahead. They can leverage some of the technology and the tools to be able to identify recruiters who may not be available now, but they are available on September 1st when they need them. And so they can also track the history of all of the recruiters, the contract recruiters that they're using, and they can favorite them, track their favorites. They can categorize them based on the skill sets that they're looking for, in case they may have a need for one type of recruiter for one project, and then a totally different type of recruiter for a different project, and they can categorize that and really organize that so that they're not spending all of their time moving that around, and they can just engage when needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how are you? How long have you guys been at this? You guys just launched this, correct?
We literally just launched last week. So we had our big official splash last week on June 3rd. And we're officially open for business, up and running. We've been working to get some of the recruiters onto the platform prior to that, which has been great. Now clients have access, and it's open for business. So super excited about that. And now it's all about leveraging the platform to obviously grow our business, but frankly help talent acquisition leaders, particularly in this unprecedented time of unpredictable hiring volumes. You talked about how hiring volumes can change and recruiting capacity can change, but now with COVID, it's even more unpredictable now than it's ever been before. So I think clients are going to be looking for how can they use variable recruiting solutions to scale quickly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's what I do in interacting with a lot of folks in the actual recruitment space, the volatility is just through the roof right now, obviously. So I think that's definitely a big, solving a big need for you guys with being able to provide that flexibility to an organization. That's pretty awesome. If I'm a contract recruiter, I mean, what's my next step to go get on the site?
Yeah, you just go to NetOneRecruiter.com, and everything else is very self-explanatory. There's a profile that you'll complete to it asks you a number of questions specific to the recruiting profession, your background. There's a video assessment that we asked each of the recruiters to actually record. So it's self-facilitated. Takes about 5 to 8 minutes to do that, and then you're up and running. You can view jobs, apply for jobs, that type of thing. And being that we're new, we're still working on getting the jobs actually on the platform, since we just announced last week. But those are going to start slowly trickling in here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, man. I think it's really exciting. Obviously, very exciting for you, but I think it's exciting for the industry. Definitely solves a need that's out there. I know we wanted to jam kind of around another topic here, and really kind of leveraging your expertise from the Navy and what you're sharing about being on the ship and how you guys leverage teamwork and stuff, and how you've applied that more into the workforce solution stuff. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so going back to the Navy, and particularly on a submarine, you've got 100 guys who are all performing a number of different jobs to very efficiently and effectively operate a mission. And it was very clear from day one when I was in the Navy what the US Navy, and frankly the entire US military, is about, and that is teamwork and training, period. We were constantly being trained, and the message was driven home time and time again that there's no one individual that's going to get the job done. It's an absolute team. And you can use all kinds of different analogies. People talk about sports and teamwork in sports, but when you look at the Navy, and particularly on a fast attack submarine, you've got guys on that submarine that are 19, 20 years old that are responsible for a multi-billion-dollar piece of equipment and the lives of 99 other sailors. And if I think about kind of the average 19-year-old that's out there,
Oh, yeah.
And putting somebody like that responsible for that many lives and that piece of equipment is just some kind of unfathomable if you really think about it. But the Navy does an amazing job, and the reason that we can pull it off is because of training and teamwork. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll give you a great example. When we talk about training the Navy, it's not just about training individuals on how to do something, right? And how to and what your job is in that particular scenario. It's also about repetitive training. So, we would literally train on the exact same function for the exact same scenario over and over and over and over again. And the mindset is you've got to make it repeatable. You've got to make it to where it, even if it's not a drill, it feels like a drill because you've done it so many times before. And so when we went through our training as a nuclear engineer, part of that was were actually academic tests where they would continuously quiz us on, what would happen in the nuclear reactor loop if something bad, if some valve shut accidentally or a pump shut off, what would happen, right? And we'd have to provide written answers, and we would get graded on these tests over and over again. And this is after I graduated nuclear power school and all of these things. It was just constantly pounding it into us so that we literally knew it like the back of our hand. And so being repetitive was really, really important. And then leveraging teamwork was obviously another piece to this because there was no one individual that could really be effective without a number of other people for any type of scenario. And so getting to my example, we were what's called in country. We were on mission, and we were at what's called periscope depth, which is about 60 feet below the surface of the ocean. And we were spying on a country. And we were providing reconnaissance for troops on the ground, as well as troops as well as our Air Force. And we were in hostile waters. We were not somewhere we were supposed to be. And probably about 2 weeks prior to this, we had received extensive training on what's called the cross-connecting of our high-pressure hydraulic systems. And they drilled it to us over and over again, just like I mentioned. And anyway, I'm standing watch in a place called engine room upper level back in the nuclear power plant. And I walk back to an area called Shaft Alley, which is where the big shaft is that drives the propulsion of the sub. And I noticed this huge mist cloud of oil coming from somewhere. Didn't know where it was coming from, but it looked like it was accelerating. It was getting thick. And I knew obviously something was wrong. And so as soon as I went to the phone to call away the problem, there was a big explosion. And what had happened was the high pressure hydraulic system in the submarine, a gasket had blown. And we were rapidly losing the pressure that allows the submarine to go up and down. And so now we're sitting in hostile waters. We've lost the ability to go up and down. And luckily, the training that I had mentioned to you was so fresh that as soon as the team got back there that needed to come back there, we immediately executed on the cross connect. And essentially what we did is we bypassed that gasket that was rupturing. And the more pressure on this was that the captain of this sub basically got on and said, hey, you have 30 seconds to cross connect high pressure hydraulic systems. Otherwise, we're going to have to emergency blow, which meant we would blow all of the air out of our ballast tanks and shoot the submarine up to the surface of the ocean. And of course, we all knew that would not have been good since we were in hostile waters. And so, the conclusion of this is that because of the unbelievable training that we had, everyone remained calm. Everyone knew exactly what they needed to do. It was a very complex procedure, but we were able to execute it fast, quickly, and efficiently because we were so well trained. And so as I start thinking about, how do we apply that, going back to, okay, we're in the recruiting profession and we're trying to be as efficient as we possibly can as talent acquisition teams. How can we apply some of that, to what we do as recruiters? And I think organizations just in general lose sight of how important ongoing subject matter training is. And it's not, there's a lot of emphasis on, okay, when you hire somebody, let's get them trained up. Okay, I think that's great. They say if you have a training program that trains them up and gets them proficient and gets them producing, that's amazing. But what kind of ongoing training are you giving them? Are you going back and revisiting some of the same exact training topics that you trained them on day one? Because if you're not, you are having people that are losing proficiency in those areas. And so, effective candidate sourcing strategies, how to communicate with difficult to handle hiring managers, and the list obviously goes on and on. And so I think, if you just think about operating efficiencies and how to best get the most production out of your team, training can never be overemphasized. And so if you're not investing in training as an organization, you need to be. And not only do you need to be thinking about what kind of repetitive training do we need to have in place, and what kind of proficiencies do I want my recruiters to constantly have, and what are the key topics that we want to continue to hit home on over and over and over again. The more you can do that, the more you're going to your recruiters are going to be more productive. When they get in those unique situations, or they're having to handle adversity, they're handling it just like they did when you trained them, right? And so now, just like we were able to cross-connect hydraulic systems very quickly and avoid a catastrophe on the submarine, you're able to really achieve maximum productivity with your recruiting team.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, this is such a huge topic. I literally just got off the phone with a lady who's thinking about bailing from her organization because they have zero training. And she's like, the guy's come in, he's got a good business, but he's not duplicated. There's no system here for me. There's nothing for me to do. There's nothing for me to follow. And, it's kind of demoralizing as the employee, because you're not really given you're coming to the organization and you're not given the skills to really execute. And obviously there's training, and then there's what you're laying out, which is more of like training on steroids, right? Which
that's right.
Yeah. And then ongoing training, and then training. And I think any company has kind of a traditional onboard, but I think the key point you're making there is like, when we're doing things from a repetition and a habit standpoint, that's where all the magic kind of happens. With my clients and being kind of a coach and mentor, that's what I'm teaching them is like, hey, these are habits that we do. We focus on marketing and lead generation, but it's like the same concept. Like, we do this over and over and over again. We don't need to go to this until we're really good at that. And I think that's what kind of keeps, when we're talking business and professionals and stuff, kind of what keeps people kind of stymied is we get shiny object syndrome, where we start chasing all these different things, and we never really become really good and really proficient in certain things that can generate a result for us in any specific angle. So
I couldn't agree more. And it's natural, and I am probably the biggest culprit of this that exists, and that is that people kind of gravitate to what they're comfortable with, right? And they try to avoid things that they're not comfortable with. And so the more that you can expose individuals to scenarios that they may not be as comfortable with, but they can become more proficient in, or, even if it's a rare scenario that might only happen, once every 3 months or once a year, I think it's important to continue to develop proficiencies in those areas, so that when it does happen, it's just another frequency of it happening, because you just trained on it 3 times in the last 2 quarters.
Yep.
So, yeah. So, and it was, going back to the Navy, it was over and over and over again. It was very structured from so that was good. But the other thing too, that I really enjoyed about the Navy is, while it was unbelievable how comprehensive the training programs were, they still continued to solicit feedback from the sailors, from the people who were doing this. Is there a better way? Do you think this technique is the most effective technique to perform X, Y, and Z? Mm-hmm. And so I think when you're thinking about putting training programs together, it's important to put structure in place. Absolutely. It's important to put schedules and repetitiveness in place, but it's also important to solicit feedback from your team, from the people on the ground, from the people doing the work. Are there better ways? Do you have a better way to perhaps explain how to effectively accomplish X, Y, and Z task? And if so, we want that feedback and we want to incorporate it into those training programs.
Absolutely. And that's going to create much more buy-in because, you're a part of it. You feel more valued in the process and things like that. It's actually it's impressive to hear that that's what happens in the Navy. From the outside, I've never, been a part of the military, but you think it's kind of like regimented systems is all you're kind of thinking. And it's impressive that something like that has that feedback, because that's cohesiveness in any organization where the team members feel valued, and any smart leader knows that, the person on the ground, is the one that really has all the data, right? It's the one that's
right.
experiencing it. So, it's, I, playing sports and, through college and stuff, obviously football is something that always mirrors kind of military style type, or not always, but a lot of coaches kind of have military style programs. And you see so many similarities where you look at good football teams, they're usually really good at the basics. They really do the fundamentals well. They practice the fundamentals well. They practice them over and over again. And that's when, I had the fortunate opportunity of playing for a guy that was a Hall of Fame football coach in college. And, he's, I played for two different coaches. So I got to experience somebody who was a college football coach, and then I got to experience somebody who was a Hall of Famer, and there was differences. And it wasn't like you would see him a bunch, but there were the little things. And, after I left the program, they went on a 10-year run of, a ton of success because they just ran the system, duplicated, but they also took a lot of player feedback. He was coming into his third year or his third round of coaching at the university. And he was old school. He was very military. They called him the little general. And so with new school players, the feedback that they eventually received is that this way isn't going to get the players to respond. Like, there's too much brashness. So on that level of feedback, again, he tweaked the way he was even coaching the team to adopt to that team, and the team just catapulted and won the championship that year. So I mean, in whatever analogy we're using it, it's just amazing when you look at the things that are focused on small details, and we're doing them over and over again. We're not overcomplicating processes, and like most cases and almost anything that we're doing in life, like simple usually wins.
Absolutely. And, if you think about also on the front end, so I've talked a lot about in the Navy repetitive training, but if you think about how I started, I could not spell nuclear engineering, and within 2 years, they basically crammed 4 years of school into 2 years and taught me how to be a nuclear engineer. And so I think it's twofold. It's not just the repetitive training, but it's also a recognition that, particularly in the new world of work, with the well-documented war on talent, which is, frankly, I think the war is over and the talent has won, right? But you have got to be able to identify talent that have the raw skills to be able to be effective, and then have the training facility to bring them in. Similar to, football, using your analogy, there may be some really, really good raw athletes that might not have played much football before. But, you can still get them up to proficiency as long as you have effective training programs. And I think, when you look at the recruiting profession, there aren't a lot of coursework or colleges, I should say, that have a ton of classes around recruiting. I mean, it's not really, you don't really get a degree in recruiting. I mean, I think most of us kind of fall into the space. So the extent that you can develop really, really solid front end training, get the skill set to a certain level of proficiency, and then continue to repeat the training over and over again, you're going to maximize the value of your recruiting team.
Yeah, that's incredibly valuable. Any advice on like how to get set up with some basic, training?
Yeah. So, so a couple things, there are a lot of options online for recruitment training. But if you're an organization, the first thing is try to get some training budget, right? And build a business case of how important it is to train. And you can start with the whole, as I just mentioned, the war on talent and the difficulty in finding effective, whether it's recruiters or other skill sets, frankly, and change the mindset of, hey, we're going to find raw talent, and we're going to train them. We're going to bring them in the organization, regardless of if it's your recruiting team or even if it's other talent. And maybe that even changes the mindset of who you're recruiting. Instead of recruiting highly experienced operators, you have a little bit more flexibility to recruit people who've got the raw skills to fit those roles. But I think building that business case and getting some recruitment budget in place, and then frankly, you know, I really believe that in order to put a proper training program in place, you need to go to an organization, and there's hundreds. I mean, you can Google them, hundreds of organizations who can formalize training programs for you. But I think you need to make it formal. You know, you need to have training material. You need to have a combination of whether it's coursework and or hands-on. There needs to be accountability for the end of training. So, you know, give people exams, give people tests. I know when I was at Manpower Group, unbelievable company. I absolutely loved my time at Manpower Group, and you know, it was tough for me to leave, but one of the things they did extremely well was provide ongoing training, and all of it was facilitated online. There were great software programs that they used. So, you know, obviously it's a little bit different when you're on a shoestring budget. If you're a startup company, you can't, you know, super structured training programs. But in that case, there are definitely things that you can pull down offline, or online, I should say. And then, you know, just start small. You know, it's the whole concept of starting slow. If you can't create this big comprehensive training program, just, you know, put something in place that works for now. And as you continue to grow, build budget, you can expand that program.
Good stuff. Good stuff. How do you, you know, obviously in the military, you really don't have, probably don't have much of a choice of your buy-in.
That's right.
How do you get buy-in from both leadership and the trainee, if you will? Like, what you need advice on that?
Yeah. So no, you're right. In the Navy, it was more about, you will do this or you will, you know, suffer the consequences. And obviously we can't manage like that in the civilian world. But I think honestly, Donnie, you really hit the nail on the head, which is you've got to make sure that everyone feels that they're involved, right? And that they're part of the process, and they're part of, you know, get people's ideas, get people's input, make them, you know, even if you kind of have it figured out how you want it, make sure that everyone's involved, make sure that you're talking to recruiters. Hey, what do you want to see? What do you want to see the outcome from this training program? Do you have any ideas or suggestions on how to expand and develop this particular training program? So I think that's really important to get buy-in on the recruiter side. You know, and from a leadership standpoint, it's, you know, hopefully people are understanding and learning that if they don't leverage training effectively, they're going to lose against their competitors. You know, companies talk, and it's more now than it's ever been before. What's your most valuable asset? It's your people. Okay, so how much do you invest in your people? How much are you training in your people? And so, you know, hopefully your leadership is supporting that. And if they're not, they need to get on board, and the best way to do that is to, you know, as I said, build that business case.
Yeah. Super good, man. Super helpful. Anything else that we haven't covered on this that you think is relevant?
You know, from a training perspective, I think just make sure you embrace it. And I remember I didn't always embrace it when I was in the Navy, for sure. And you know, like, oh my gosh, we're doing this drill again, or you got to take this test. This is the 4th time I've taken this test. You've got to change the mindset of, hey, there's a reason behind this. The reason is when you find yourself back in Shaft Alley with a ruptured high pressure hydraulic system, you're going to know what to do so that you don't die, you know, or that you don't compromise the ship. I think the same way goes for training and recruiting. You know, you've got to embrace it. You've got to make it really truly part of the fabric of what you're doing. I would say in the Navy, almost 95% of our time spent was on training. We were constantly training, whether it was written tests or drills. We were constantly training. So, I mean, I think about these, you know, I was on a submarine and we had our own challenges, but I think about, you know, pilots landing an airplane on an aircraft carrier. I just can't imagine what that must be like, and the fear. But those guys they set it down every time. And if something weird happens, they know what to do, right? And it's like old habit. And so I think that's just absolutely, you know, to kind of wrap the training piece up, I think that's just so important, is to just make it a habit, embrace it, make it truly part the, you know, a fabric or sort of woven into your overall philosophy.
Yes, super good, Bill. I appreciate you sharing all of that and being here today. What are you kind of most excited about now? You got the new business up and running. I mean, what are you fired up about, as we move forward here throughout the rest of 2020 and in the future?
Yeah, I'm a huge innovation guy. I love seeing technology evolve. I think that we've seen a significant expansion of technology in general in the
Mhm.
talent acquisition industry. Um, I think more and more as you are challenged with finding skilled workers. I mean, right now, obviously, unemployment's crazy, and we're in a crazy time. But we're going to get back. I think it's going to scale back pretty quickly, particularly once we see a vaccine, and hopefully in early 2021, we'll get back to more of a pro-COVID economy. But I think being able to leverage the different types of technologies that are out there and different techniques to help organizations find talent. We were, again, going back to Manpower Group. Manpower Group had a thing they called the human age, and they basically said, "Hey, listen, we are entering the human age, which means that organizations who have access to the best talent are going to win." Before it was organizations who had access to the most capital, or
Mhm.
organizations who had access to the best technology. Now it's all about talent. So if you're in the recruiting profession, if you're in and around talent acquisition or talent management or workforce solutions, you are in an amazing industry, and you have a tremendous opportunity. So I think that as we continue to evolve and we see more and more it's difficult to find this talent, being able to leverage the different kinds of technology that are out there to quickly scale and find talent that is aligned to your business strategy, and making sure that that workforce plan is aligned to their business strategy is it's going to be a lot of fun to see that and how that plays out in the next year or two.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. For those that are listening, I mean, how can they get in touch with Bill?
Yeah, so you can email me, bill.peters@netonerecruiter.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm out there, so feel free to connect. I love collaborating. I love networking. I'll take a call from anyone, and I love coaching. So I really enjoy watching people grow, companies grow. I've been in the workforce solutions space for 20 years now, so I've got some pretty good connections and a lot of good experiences that I can kind of pull from, and would love to help anybody that would want to reach out and connect.
Awesome, man. Before we go, if you could leave us with one last piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, so kind of going back a little bit, a departure from the training, but back a little bit more on teamwork, and we've touched on this a little bit. But my advice is that and when I started this business, I always said I'm not going to start it with by myself. I always felt like at least one other person, right? I felt like I wanted to be part of a team out of the gate, and so I think it's really important that if you're a recruiting leader or if you're a recruiter, that if you're part of a team, to embrace that and make sure that you are not just going off on an island and doing your own thing, but that you share ideas, you share thoughts, you interact with others. If you find a coaching opportunity for somebody, provide some coaching.
Mhm.
If you need some coaching, ask for coaching, because I think it's just, I continued. It's amazing, and I think everybody probably listening and yourself included, Donnie, can attest that. It's cliche to say, but it's absolutely true. We're constantly learning.
Yep.
We're constantly picking up. We're observing good habits, bad habits, and we need to continue to evaluate those, analyze those, and become better. So, really embrace the team that you're part of. Understand that 2 minds are better than 1, 3 minds are better than 2, and I think if you do that, and like I said, put that good training program in place, you're going to have a great recruiting team.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again so much for hanging out with me today, and everybody else. We will see you next week on the show. Thanks again, Bill.
Thanks a lot, Donnie. Appreciate it.